In this section, we're going to talk about how you have to be careful when you decide whether or not to believe the results of a given study. Statistics can have errors, they can be misinterpreted, or they can even be intentionally manipulated. Some common problems with statistical studies have to do with the samples or the conclusions. And some of these we've talked about already and we'll elaborate on a little more here. The first problem is a bad sample, a biased sample. We're going to spend a lot of time in the next section talking about how to collect a good sample, so we'll come back to that. Another issue with that would be a small sample. If you only interview a couple of people and then try and make a conclusion about a larger group, that can be very misleading. It's actually surprising how small a sample can be, like a sample of just 1,000 people might be able to represent the whole country, for example. And we'll talk later in the semester about how to calculate exactly how many people need to be in your sample. Other problems are misleading conclusions, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about those as well. An example of a bias sample I've talked about before, and that's the voluntary response sample. Anytime people have to go out of their way to participate in a study or a survey, that's going to skew the data, and you can only draw conclusions about the type of person who will go out of their way to participate. Sometimes actual mistakes are made. It's very common for people to calculate percentages wrong, so that's something to take a close look at when you're reading a study. The results of a study can also be affected by the way the question is asked. If the question is asked in a way that elicits an emotional response or manipulates the participants in some other way, then you need to be aware of that when you read the study. And you also have to watch out for misleading conclusions. If the person doing the study has come to an invalid conclusion, then you need to be careful to notice that. I gave the example before of the coffee study that linked coffee to cancer, and that does not necessarily mean that the coffee causes the cancer. There are other kinds of conclusions that can be misleading as well, so you want to carefully read through a study and make sure that they haven't manipulated the conclusions in any way.